I'm sure you've all seen it by now, but if you're not aware, there is a massive standoff happening between James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers, specifically with President of Basketball Operations Daryl Morey, who before they had always had a close relationship, but something happened this offseason that caused a rift in their relationship, presumably around contract negotiations. And it's gotten so bad to the point that James Harden has been emphatic in never wanting to play for the Sixers again, calling Morey a liar and that he'll never play for an organization for which he's a part of. I actually discussed this in more detail on my NBA channel in a video I posted yesterday, which couldn't become more timely after Harden also made those statements about Morey being a liar. I'll leave a link to that video in case you missed it. Also, feel free to check out my NBA channel and One Hoops. Link to all of that is in the description if you're ever looking for more content outside of just the Bulls. But that aside, James Harden and the news has led to a lot of trade proposals popping off all over the place really since the beginning of the offseason when Harden requested a trade, even though the Sixers are claiming to end trade talks and expecting Harden to report to camp. That should be fun. But one of the more common trade proposals I've seen among Bulls fans and on Twitter is a trade of DeMar DeRozan for James Harden. And while in theory, maybe if you're just looking at the players and what they bring individually, this could make some sense for both sides. But in reality, there is no way this trade would happen, and it's for a number of reasons which we'll talk about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I want to start from the outset and say that no one is denying that James Harden is a great player. Still one of the best scorers in the league, one of the best playmakers in the league. He led the NBA in assists last season to over 10 per game, and he's a great three-point shooter on high volume, which is something the Bulls could certainly use. So I don't want to make this video as a takeaway that, we're just bashing James Harden here, because it's probably going to come off that way. But like I said, there are elements of trading DeMar for Harden that would make sense for both sides. The Bulls need shooting, they need playmaking, like they really do need a floor general, and both players are going to be going into expiring deals, so if things didn't work out, they could in theory just abort the experiment after the season and let both players walk. DeMar and the Sixers still gives them the needed offense that they would require to replace the lost offense from James Harden. They would have a more level-headed and stable leader in DeRozan than someone like Harden, and by trading for DeMar, it would enable them to still be one of the better teams in the East and be a contender as long as they still have Embiid. Losing Harden and not getting a valuable star or someone to replace his offense, the Sixers, they wouldn't be a contender, they just wouldn't. And if they're trying to maximize Embiid's prime, well, this is one way they could do it rather than just trading for, say, some younger players or draft picks. Where things fall off, though, that wouldn't make sense, and that goes for both sides, but I'll start with the Sixers because it's quick and easy. If you don't know Daryl Morey, then you should know that he doesn't have a traditional basketball background for those who have risen the ranks in becoming an executive in an NBA front office. Morey has always been a big-time stat nerd, and he prides himself on using advanced analytics and metrics to influence winning. His philosophy has always been a method that is predicated on three-point shooting and shots around the basket within 3 feet. Anything outside of that is an inefficient shot to him. It's why he loves Harden, because he's a heavy, high-volume three-point shooter, but also a great slasher that can get to the basket, who can create contact while finishing at the rim. DeMar DeRozan is not that player. While yes, DeMar is great at creating contact, he can get to the line at will, and he's solid at getting to the rim and using his athleticism to finish strong, but we all know DeMar is not a three-point shooter. It's just not part of his game and never has been. And he primarily thrives in the mid-range, which is the antithesis of what Morey likes. I said in a tweet earlier this morning when people were talking about this trade, a player like DeRozan would be Daryl Morey's nightmare and would go against everything he stands for when it comes to stats and analytics. So that reason alone is why this trade would never happen as long as Morey is running things. Unless Harden's trade value got so bad that the Sixers would rather at least bring in a star rather than trading him for peanuts, then sure. But that's where the problem starts for the Bulls, and the real reason why this trade would never happen. Look, as good as Harden is, yes, he is an all-star, one of the better players in the league, and yes, he would help the Bulls' outside shooting woes and the need for a point guard. You also have to consider more than just the basketball side of things. Right now for the Bulls, they need a player that is going to be a leader, someone that is going to stabilize the locker room, be a mentor to the younger guys, and be a positive influence on this team from a chemistry perspective. James Harden is the opposite of that. In the past few years, he's been a locker room problem, a selfish player that has only been looking out for himself, a player whose game, to be honest, hasn't really impacted winning in recent years, and mind you, a player that is also going to be seeking a max contract extension, a max contract for a player at his age, soon to be 34, and is declining, because even though Harden is still decent, he's not the same James we once knew back in Houston, who was putting up over 30 a game and was super athletic in his ability to beat defenders off the dribble. The last thing the Bulls should look to do is bring in another star past his prime who doesn't impact winning, and is going to be horrible for overall team chemistry and the locker room. Say what you will about DeMar, doesn't play defense, can't shoot threes, slows down the offense, can be a selfish player at times, but he's a high character guy. He is a leader, young players love him, and the front office and coaching staff love him. And he's still a damn good player, let's not forget that. So even if trading Harden made sense on paper, which it really doesn't, the Bulls wouldn't make this move because of the implications it would have on the rest of the team. Because of the fact that Harden isn't the same player he used to be, and also because, given Harden's recent behavior and wanting to bounce at the time of a hat when things don't go his way, and then also teams being unwilling to give him a max contract for that. Yeah, not a chance in hell the Bulls would even consider this trade. The other thing is that I honestly think the reason the Sixers announced their closing trade talks for Harden is because they completely misread the trade market for him and realized they weren't going to get much value for him and would potentially even have to move assets to get him off the team. They figured they were probably better off in trying to mend the relationship and getting him to stay rather than trading him for pennies on the dollar. And because of that, why would the Bulls give up one of their star players, who granted his trade value at the moment isn't very high, but why would they give up that kind of asset in DeMar DeRozan for James Harden? When if they really wanted Harden, they would probably be able to get away with giving up much less to get him. Even though, yes, I'm aware you have to make salaries work, which makes it more challenging, but the point is trading DeMar for Harden would be malpractice on the part of Acme when Harden's trade value is so low right now and the Sixers have such little leverage in trying to move him. So I hate to burst the bubble of those few Bulls fans who want to make this trade happen. I know most of you don't, but for those that do, yeah, it's not happening. It really just doesn't make sense for both sides when you consider all the factors at play. But I would love to hear what you guys think. I'll likely put out a poll on this, whether you guys think that this trade would actually make sense and whether it would happen. But let me know. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.